Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast, hosted by Alison Humphries. The Recruitment Leadership Podcast is here to help those in the recruitment industry gain awareness and understanding on the hot topics faced by those in the business of hiring people. In each episode, Alison Humphries is joined by a fellow expert to offer professional knowledge, insight and advice on the biggest subjects affecting recruitment businesses. It's the podcast to listen to for recruitment business frontrunners seeking expert information from industry-leading advisors. Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. Regular listeners will know that this is part of a series where I interview leaders of recruitment businesses, and we learn something different about their sectors and about their approach to growth and what makes those companies unique and different. I am delighted to be joined today by two friends and clients. That's James Truswell and Andrew Dean of Menlo Park Recruitment. Welcome, guys.
Thanks very much for having us.
Yeah, thanks very much.
It's my pleasure. And looking forward to talking a little bit more about the business. Before we do, brief intro. James and Andrew, you met while working at another recruitment business and then decided to set up on your own. Prior to that, you had different backgrounds. James, you were a journalist. Andrew, you worked in a museum. So let's just start there. What on earth attracted you to recruitment in the first place? Andrew?
Yeah, I suppose it was a classic case of not knowing what I wanted to do. After finishing university, I'd done archaeology at university and had actually signed up to do law. So I was going to be a lawyer, and then freaked out last minute and decided, no, thank you. I don't want to do that. And I'd been doing some museum work whilst I'd been doing my studies. So an opportunity presented itself. I started working in a museum. I didn't think I'd be there for as long as I was, but it was 2008. So the last time that we were properly in a recession. So it wasn't easy to look for opportunities. And as much as I liked, working in that job, it was very interesting. It wasn't very target driven. It was hard to get motivated. I knew I wanted something that was going to push me. So the role that I went for in the end was just actually in the same town that I was working with at the time. So I was comfortable with the location. It was in medical recruitment. And my family come from a background of working in medical. So I thought that, locationally, it was going to be good. And it was, an industry I could get behind and learn. So I went for it. And initially, actually, I didn't get the job. I was given the whole, spiel. Oh, it was very close. You were second. We went with someone with more experience. And I genuinely didn't think I'd hear from them again. And I was getting married a few months later anyway, so I, was pretty busy. And then literally a week before my wedding, was contacted. Oh, you still interested in a job? I was like, yes. I went and literally, they offered me the job then and there, which I accepted, and I started straight after I got married. So, yeah, it was like most people getting into recruitment. It was yes, I chose. I applied for it, but there was no specific kind of desire to work in recruitment prior to me seeing this advert.
Right, but you were interested in something that was goal orientated, and you were quite happy to take on a targeted type environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the key. I mean, even whilst I was there, as I say, it was a recession. It was really difficult to to apply for roles. During that period, I'd signed up for forensic archaeology with the University of Bradford because I still didn't know what I wanted to do, and I got accepted onto that course as well. But I'd not applied for much within recruitment. I knew I didn't want to do anything kind of, general. I specifically, targeted agencies that would give me the opportunity to learn a sector, to become an expert. I was specifically choosing environments that were going to, push me. I wanted to earn a bit more money as well. You don't earn much working in a museum. So it was those, it was those kind of factors that prompted me. I did have a close family member that worked in recruitment as well, that had given me a bit of an insight into the industry.
Okay, so you had some idea what you were taking on. And James, what attracted you from journalism into recruitment?
Well, Andy probably had about 10 reasons there and then eventually got to money. Whereas for me, I think probably the first reason was money, because again, a bit like working in museums, being a journalist doesn't pay very well at all. And I was in print journalism. So I was working for a regional newspaper back in Stoke, the Stoke Sentinel, and it's a daily paper. It's quite a big paper, but I could see the writing was on the wall in terms of where print journalism was going and where journalism was going in general. And I didn't want to do broadcast journalism. It wasn't really my thing. So it was basically, now's the time to get out. Yeah, it was just for what you did as a journalist, it was very low paying. I actually really enjoyed the job. But it's evenings, weekends, it's hard work, it's unpaid overtime, it's all those things that, well, actually you do a lot of these things in recruitment, but then you get paid for them. It's brilliant. Whereas you don't get that in journalism. And I just felt like I could actually do recruitment, because I think one of the really important things that a good recruiter needs to be good at is proactivity and not waiting for things to come to you. And it's the same with journalism. You don't just get stories. You've got to go out and find them. You've got to go knocking on doors. There's many times when an incident happens. It could be someone getting hit by a bus, or something equally as grim normally, because most journalism is pretty grim. And then you'd have to go and find the family members of that child that got hit by a bus and knock on their door. And I think if you can go and knock on the door of parents whose child's just got hit by a bus and try and get a story out of them and do it successfully, then you could probably work in recruitment.
Okay, really interesting parallel that I don't think most people would have thought of. So, but interestingly, you have both mentioned money motivation, and it's something that when I'm speaking to clients, I often ask them, how do you assess this when selecting new recruiters who haven't got any background in recruitment? And it's people tend to sort of pussyfoot around it a little bit. We look for competitiveness and goal orientation, and those are right. But you can actually be highly competitive and not money motivated. And there comes a point where that competitiveness will not be the right level to get people to work in difficult markets. Okay, so moving on, you set up together Menlo Park Recruitment, based in Leeds. The business has been very successful. You've been awarded Recruitment Company of the Year by your public in the GP Awards, and Most Outstanding Primary Care Recruitment Company and the Global Excellence Awards. So you clearly had a desire to do something different when you set up. James, I'd like you, if you would, for our listeners' benefit, to tell us about your business now, some key points about the markets that you serve, and what you hope to achieve when you guys set up Menlo Park.
Okay, well, as we are now, we are still GP centred in terms of our core market, so primary care. Although we actually only set up recruiting GPs, we now recruit allied health, so nurse practitioners, practice nurses, paramedics, physician associates, pharmacists, anything that goes into a GP surgery, and that kind of remains our core market, probably about 70 to 80%, and that's the market that I lead on, and Andy leads on health tech, which is both UK and US based, which is newer, less than 2 years old, fledgling, and I think difficult. It's fair to say that new markets are difficult. It's like setting up a new business every time. When you don't have a reputation or a candidate database, all you really have is a company name, a logo, and a bit of back office support, but apart from that, you're starting from scratch every time. So that's where we are now. But just going back to the other point you asked about in terms of our aims, our vision at the start, I think I'd be really honest, I don't know if Andy's got a different answer to this, but I'm not sure if I had much of a vision at the start. I think to start with, I just wanted to leave the company we were working for quite a few reasons. It didn't sit right with me working there, and they didn't treat staff amazingly well. So the first thing was, I think, getting out, and then to start with, just trying to survive. The two of us billing, obviously working from my flat in Leeds, which was like a kitchen, living room, dining room, and office all in one. And at that point, it was just, can we do it? Can we bill? And that was it to start with. And to be fair, it has been Andy that's driven the growth in terms of headcount, a vision for actually going beyond just us, I think, mainly. I think otherwise I probably would have just sat there, in my little room, just billing machine, on the phone all day, every day, probably doing quite well, but not necessarily growing a whole business.
And there was no doubt about it. I mean, the two of you were making very substantial revenues just being billers yourself. GPs are very much in the news at the moment. And so it would be helpful, I think, for our listeners just to understand a little bit about the recruiting into the GP sector, because you're not working via NHS frameworks, are you? It's slightly different from that. What are the specific challenges in that market?
Well, just I suppose in terms of the market, it's the shortage is the main thing. Since I started recruiting in GPs in 2013, there's been a candidate shortage since then, and that's still the case now. It's probably more so than ever. I think we did an audit recently that because we track all live jobs across all job boards, and I think vacancies had gone up in the last 12 months by about 60%. So we were already in a shortage market, and now there's 60% more vacancies with the same amount of GPs. And obviously they're retiring earlier, they're choosing locum work, or they're going to Australia or Canada. So the main thing is the shortage. There's consistent talk of burnout. It's on the agenda in primary care. So most GPs really feel like they can only work part-time because of how difficult and intense the job is on a daily basis. So that's a big challenge, I think, for the government to try and solve that, which doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon.
And it's a matter of very public record that this is a major problem. And of course, even in a shortage occupation, you cannot just go overseas and recruit GPs, because lots of countries don't have that model of primary care, of a general practitioner at the front line, do they? So, Andy, you've been leading on expansion into new markets. Could you just talk our audience through the logic behind that? Why you chose the markets that you did, and what the challenges and opportunities have been.
So pre-pandemic, we'd earmarked health tech as an area that we wanted to look at. For obvious reasons, it was just looking at the future. It was just looking at the way that people were accessing healthcare. It looked like a kind of area that we could get into. And I suppose, an important thing about it as well was that it was significantly different from, primary care in terms of, spreading risk and how, markets might affect one and potentially not the other. So that was actually, we'd worked on that as part of, some forecasting in about 2019, I think. Then obviously we had the pandemic. And it did affect, primary care. A lot of people assume that because we're working, within the NHS, and because it was so busy, that it was just, for us, it was a good time, just watching the fees roll in. But that's not how the primary care market responded, at all. Actually, it really kind of just froze up and went very insular. We survived because we had really good relationships, but new business was hard to come by. And there was a bit of a hairy time for 4 to 6 months during the middle of that. So that prompted us to I suppose bring some of those plans that we'd had to to the forefront and start to look at other sectors. During that time, I suppose what you had was the availability of certain candidates on the market, shall we say, that perhaps were not there before. So I was having different conversations with people that were available. So we did look at a couple of different markets beyond health tech as well at the same time. Let's just say it was a learning curve during that period. And to be quite frank, some of the things that we looked at, they simply they've not worked the way that we perhaps expected. And one of the things that I've learned is you can't just take the blueprint of something that's working really well, for example, like primary care, and transpose that onto a different market. There's been some really kind of interesting takeaways from that, and I'm glad we've done it, because I think if we kind of remained within that primary care bubble, which we do so well, there's only so much you can learn, I think. when you're when you're at the top of your game. I think it's from challenging situations and trying to overcome certain difficulties, which is where you grow and where you learn a bit more about recruitment.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? More and more, when I look across all the business owners I know in recruitment, the specialisation in sector has become more than just a business development tool now. Recruitment businesses are the best ones are of their sector rather than simply a supplier to it or taking revenue from it or people from it. Yeah, they're actually contributing to it, the totality of intelligence in their sector, retention and attraction to the sector, and so on. And so you get that very high level of specialism. But when you hit the level of penetration that you guys have got in the GP market, you do have to diversify. And then you discover, as you say, Andy, that taking the same approach, particularly when you're moving from national to international and public sector to private sector, it really doesn't work. And it's something that's hard to explain until you've had a few knockbacks and felt it yourself, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's everything from how you acquire really good data, because I've commented before that recruitment companies, your data and marketing companies with a sales department. So if you don't get your data right, then not much else falls into place after that, to be honest. So yeah, trying to acquire really good data, both domestically and overseas is really challenging, particularly within a niche that isn't defined. So in lots of other recruitment industries, you'll have people approaching you all the time saying, "Oh, do you want to buy this? This B2B data," and they'll have contacts and things like that. Health tech in particular, it's not defined. If you go on to LinkedIn, health tech companies feature under about 6 or 7 industries as specified by LinkedIn, and a lot of the data companies, they're working on those types of platforms to acquire data sets along with other things, of course. But it becomes quite challenging and tricky to acquire, and then you've got to think about how you're going to market and reach target audience, and then you've got to think about obviously competitors that already exist within those markets. And then, for example, if you're looking at the US, which we do on health tech, it's such a huge market, and there are certain kind of cultural differences as well when you're approaching American businesses that we'd perhaps not thought of previously. Not to mention the time differences and those types of things that you have to contend with. So yeah, a lot of what I've just mentioned there are things that we're learning as we go along. So yeah, it's not as straightforward as you think, and there's a whole lot of learning that you need to do. But it has been really interesting, and it has been challenging, and I think that is definitely given us more of a well-rounded, holistic view of recruitment than if we were just concentrating on our core market.
You've actually been through a huge amount of growth in the last 2 years. Not everything's worked out, but during that, I'd like to focus in now on, with both of you, on how your skills as a leader have developed. So, Andy, you touched on it there. You were saying that the importance of data and getting that right from the beginning and realizing when it's not possible. That's a big factor. James, can I flick back to you and ask you how you feel your skills as a leader have developed over the last 2 years?
Yeah. So I've been a recruiter for 10 years. So kind of the first 8 have been just billing, as I said, kind of tunnel vision, just kind of ignoring everyone and just getting on with billing. And then it's been the past 2 years when I've actually started taking management responsibility and running the primary care team. So kind of in that time, there's probably been a few key lessons, I think, particularly management things. I'd say number one is don't assume that everyone wants to be managed how you like to be managed. I think everyone wants to be managed differently. There's so many different personalities, even in my team, which is 11 direct consultant reports. And what motivates some people completely demotivates the others. And I'm kind of learning as I go, and that people work at different speeds and have different strengths and weaknesses. And obviously it's your job as a manager to identify what they are, and so you can add value in the right places. So that's probably number one. And then Number two is your staff are human beings, and so are you. I think a good recruiter needs to be naturally empathetic, and so should good leaders. I think if you're not empathetic towards your staff, then they're not going to have much interest in the company, and probably over time might even resent working for you. And recruiters aren't just billing machines that you can kind of just switch on and then just leave them to bill. They need maintenance. They need regular time with you, and I think they actually need a purpose as well. Certainly with Gen Z coming through, they need a purpose as well as just commission. Whereas I suppose, touching back on why I got into recruitment, it was commission. Whereas I think these days commission doesn't seem to be enough. Earning loads of money doesn't seem to be enough. They'd actually need to feel wanted and have that purpose.
Something that, obviously having worked with you, I would also say is that your level of analytical skills is really high. You've always got a very, very tight grip on the actualities of the finances, what our average fees are, what the trends are, and so forth. So it's I think that analytical skill is something that's you've got even stronger at. Andy, over to you. How do you think your skills as a leader have developed in terms of leading the business as well as managing people?
I suppose it's been an interesting, couple of years, and I think, as I said before, things are, when things are going, when it's straightforward and there aren't any bumps in the road, it's easy, but it's easy to become, complacent as well at the same time. And I don't think it's, I don't think you grow in those kind of environments. So I think, I suppose the challenges for us as well as a growing business is when it's a smaller group of people, you have a smaller number of personalities. The demands on you are naturally less. When you grow, you've got to delegate to a certain degree, and I think that's one of the things that we found really difficult letting go of, because it was because it's been James and myself's business, and we started as a twosome. It's very much our baby, something that we have a lot of pride in. And up until recently, we have been the ones making decisions, setting the tone, and that type of thing. So for me, it's gradually dealing with volume in terms of the number of people, and also letting go in terms of delegation and handing certain activities over to different members of the team. But that's also been a really positive thing as well, because that's been absolutely essential to actually grow even further, because it gets to a point where you can't invest any more of your kind of time or expertise into something. You do need that help. So letting go and not being as much of a control freak, I think, is something that I've had to learn, because I can be very much of a a control freak, I think.
Can I just add one more on that, actually? In terms of, I suppose, one thing that we've learned, or one thing that I think recruitment companies probably should do better, is ensuring that your back office team, so for us that's the admin team and the marketing team, are fully aligned in the company vision, and that the recruiters actually understand the importance of what they do, and how much impact they have on what they do. And if you've got an engaged back office team that's extremely competent, then they're going to add massive value to your business and allow your recruiters to bill much more than if they weren't very good or if they turned over. So for us, we introduced a commission scheme for the admin and marketing team last quarter, out of feedback we got on we did an anonymous survey, I think for the first time last November, and the engagement on the recruiting side was amazing. It was really high, 90% or something, whereas on the admin and marketing side it was lower. And I think it's because in recruitment companies, recruiters can often earn so much money and obviously think it's all about them, and can often be selfish. And you do need recruiters to be selfish, so not arguing with that, but it's focused so much on the recruiter because they're doing the final bit. Obviously, it is a big part of the process, the recruitment in a recruitment company. But sometimes admin and marketing might feel lost or disengaged, and from a financial point of view, not feel like they're getting rewarded. Whereas now, here, they are on a commission scheme, which is based on business performance. It's basically how well are the consultants doing, and they will get a percentage of that at the end of each quarter. And recently, the engagement's gone up on the last anonymous survey we did by some distance.
Right. Okay. So it's a really good point, and you guys have a fairly substantial back office team. Andy, can I just flip back to you? Can you just describe what constitutes your back office team, and any other specific actions that you take to involve those people in the aims of the business?
Yeah, I suppose crucially, and for anyone listening, when we talk about growing and headcount and things like that, people are going to assume we're talking about recruitment consultants, but the admin team and our marketing function have always grown alongside the recruitment team. So we've got about something like 6 dedicated admin staff, and particularly on primary care, our central the core of the business. It's about taking as much paperwork and downtime away from consultants as possible. So they do a tremendous amount of work when it comes to market intelligence stuff. So the gathering of vacancy intel, making sure that goes on the CRM system, so that we can chase directly from there. So in our business, consultants aren't having to look for opportunities; they're there on the system. It's a quick search; they can go and do that, and it makes the process really efficient. They deal with any kind of incoming responses to adverts, marketing queries. Literally everything in relation to maintaining the CRM system. So the whole kind of philosophy behind that is the consultants are then left to get on with actually being a consultant and focusing on sales activity, the stuff that's actually going to make money for the business and the stuff that they actually want to do. Because I'm sure it's common across every recruitment business. Sometimes it's not exactly admin is not the forte of a lot of recruitment consultants, and I think a lot of the time it's because they don't think they should be getting bogged down with it. They want to be focused on those activities that are going to deliver results. So that's really important for our business. Then we have a separate marketing function headed up by our marketing manager. And that's been really important as well. As I said earlier on, it's recruitment companies are data and marketing companies, and sales is marketing. So having that dedicated focus and someone looking at all of our social media channels, website, literally leading from the front as far as initiatives are concerned, and bringing innovations to things that we're doing in terms of specific projects. It makes a huge difference, because it's stuff that the consultants aren't having to think about, but it's stuff that they can brand with, and it's stuff that results in more incoming inquiries into the business.
Absolutely. And so many times I hear recruitment consultants go, you might be asking about the history of a placement and where did that candidate come from? And they say, they just phoned in. It never actually happens like that, does it? Even if they have picked up the phone, that is a result of all the brand building efforts, multiple touch points, very often created by a marketing team and an admin team. And of course, you make strong use of resources to gather data as well. Okay. So the last 2 years have of course been characterized by the pandemic and other big shifts. Brexit, obviously, multiple skills shortages, the Me Too movement, the influence of Gen Z, and so forth. As leaders in recruitment, where typically we tend to have a youngish employee profile. What do you think the most important things are that leaders now have to do differently?
Yeah, I think Jay alluded to it in the previous question when he mentioned about the survey. So I think the first thing is don't have any assumptions, but one of the the second most important point is having your employees as stakeholders. So getting them involved on decisions. So things like the surveys have been really important in terms of fostering engagement. But then actually it's not just a case of doing a survey and going, oh great, we've got a fantastic score. You've got to take points away from that, actionable items, and then be seen to work upon those in the business. So I think that's been really really important for us as an organization. So we're trying to give people a voice, because it's not just about it's difficult. People will come to you with certain issues and problems and queries, but they won't in certain other scenarios. So giving them a platform when they where they can comment anonymously or confidentially is really important to us, fostering that overall feeling of trust, and then actually doing something with the data and feedback. So we'd recommend that to any recruitment business.
Yeah, actually, the whole, you said in the survey XYZ, we listened, here's what we've done, or indeed even just saying here's why we can't do anything about that at the moment, is really important.
Yeah, you can't action everything, but as long as you're prepared to enter dialogue and then have a proper conversation about it, sometimes that's enough. But there have been a range of things that we have been able to actually make specific changes for and allowances for.
Give us some more examples, if you would, Andy. So we've heard about the commission for non-billing staff.
Yeah, that was a really really good one. One that springs to mind is the menopause. It's something that someone had a member of staff had mentioned, and that allowed us to actually speak to a professional that came into to the business to explain about what some of the issues are for workplaces and people going through that, what we can do, and in turn that actually led to a really good series that we ran across social media that so it allowed us to look at internally, but we also did some stuff particularly on the primary care side of things, that was a series looking at the menopause and working with certain professionals in that field to spread the I suppose the message that not a lot of it is, that not much is done about it in workplaces, and it affects so many women across a multitude of different working environments, and even within GP surgeries themselves. A lot of clinicians felt they were not able or they were not receiving appropriate education on how to treat patients and even help colleagues that were going through it. So just through that one suggestion, as I say, it had an impact on us internally, but it also allowed us to have an impact with with our with our network. And it's like you said, when you get to a certain size, you want to become you want to be a stakeholder, you want to be involved in processes and things that impact the sector. And that's something that genuinely did. But then we've had queries on everything from certain processes. We had something about sick pay, which was interesting, because obviously we're in recruitment, we're a private company, and no one likes to take a day off sick in recruitment if you can help it. But it came from a member of staff, and as Jay said previously, not everyone is concerned with just the money. We get a lot of kind of suggestions around health and well-being in work. So we're starting to get we do have private healthcare policies and well-being policies already in situ, but we do also now and then get a couple of questions about can you look at this, and we are actually looking at the sick pay, and we are going to be introducing a sick pay policy for the first time.
Thank you. Okay. And any listeners, by the way, who are rolling their eyes and thinking, oh, menopause, that's nothing to do with me. Here's a fascinating statistic. By 2024, just 2 years away, government estimates say that 1 in every 2 workers will be over 50, which statistically means that about 1 in every 4 will be affected by that. So that's a lot, isn't it? James, you were about to say something, I think.
I was just going to add one more thing in terms of leaders and expectations these days, and I think it's obviously being mental health aware. I mean, obviously mental health's not new on the agenda necessarily, but it's something that you will have to tackle as a leader, and it's prevalent. And I suppose just to give you one specific example, we've got a consultant who's a high performer here, who has been performing very well, but has been struggling a bit mentally. Hasn't affected billings necessarily, but just a general feeling of low mood. So I think Andy mentioned we've got the private health, and yeah, you can organise counselling through that, but not everyone wants to go for the counselling option, and there's that. Well, I don't know if there is still a stigma. I think there is for some people at least to have counselling. So instead, what I arranged for this person was a session with our recruitment trainer, who's kind of part recruitment trainer, but she's also part psychology guru, and just very, very bright and understands people. To have a session with this consultant, and basically, I think diagnose the person as having very low level kind of post-COVID anxiety just ebbing away at this person, and it's just created this low mood and almost kind of survivor's guilt about not really massively being impacted by COVID, and set action points, told this person actions to take, and is already feeling much better. And it just took someone who is a recruitment trainer by trade, but I knew what she was like in terms of on the psychological side, to really help this person overcome it, who is already feeling better. So I think it's just being aware and take action.
It's an interesting example, isn't it, of how much more than ever before, leaders in all sorts of businesses have to, in effect, deal with the whole person rather than just the work aspects of what they do. And I know if I go way back in time to my first roles, I remember being advised, look, only deal with them as what you can control that's right in front of you, that's work related. And actually, the remit now is much, much bigger, and employees expect you to take an active interest in the full 360 of them. I mean, is it all doable? Question. Is it unrealistic to expect you to be, an inspirational leader, a man manager, an entertainer, a financial advisor, a social worker, a social conscience as well, providing CSR opportunities and all the rest of it. Where does this end, and how do you actually manage those pressures yourselves? Andy?
Is it achievable? I'm not sure. I think, for James and I, we probably still, are in that position, because, despite the growth, it's a fairly flat management structure still. We've got people coming through the ranks, and, that infrastructure will, change eventually, but we still are, in many respects, the figurehead of the business, and people do look to you for advice, whether it's work or personal. It's just it's just a fact. And we've never positioned ourselves away from the action, as it were, in terms of locking ourselves away. We're very accessible. We've never had separate offices. We've always been on the sales floor. We are just by nature, I think, quite approachable, and we are quite available a lot of the time. So I think we obviously deal with things best we can, and it's nice that we've got each other to fall back on for advice and that type of thing. But I think the answer is that as I say, is it achievable? I don't know, but we're having to do it. But I think James obviously just gave an example where, he's faced with a situation, and he was able to identify some external help that, solve that particular issue. Because there are certain things that we're not going to be able to necessarily, deal with or handle. But then you've just got to use, your common sense, draw on your bank of, support, that are, outside the business potentially, and do the best that you can.
James, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I think I agree. So your question is basically, can we do it all as leaders? I think we have to. People's expectations of leaders these days are pretty high, I think. Although that might be, the imposter syndrome talking. But I think if you're not strong on all fronts, then you probably lose something from that person. I mentioned Gen Z earlier on, and I suppose we're kind of equipping ourselves for them coming in. We don't have many of them. In fact, the one that kind of fits into the Gen Z here doesn't act like a Gen Z, but I think as they're prevalent in the workforce, they're going to want more time off, more flexibility, I think a greater social and environmental responsibility from a business. I mentioned the purpose before as well. And I think that to be competitive in recruiting, and it is a tough market to recruit anything, it seems, not just a recruiter, but absolutely anything seems hard to recruit these days. You've got to be a flexible employer, and I think you've got to be everything as a leader for people to want to work for you.
And of course, as most recruitment business owners are running micro businesses, that flexibility is still in their toolkit, unlike for a very large company. One thing I would add, and that is that we don't necessarily have the skills or the training to address every issue that staff bring up. So you raised the whole issue of mental health and well-being, and actually using experienced staff assist and confidential staff assistance services, which are, provide trained counsellors who can deal with some of this stuff. It can be really, really useful. I know a lot of inexperienced managers who have got sucked into trying to diagnose and treat well-being issues, or even offer financial advice to their staff, which is very risky, and actually is probably better dealt with by a trained counsellor. So those can be a really useful and cost-effective route to pick. Okay, so let's move to the future now. James, could you give our audience a brief outline of what your growth plans are at Menlo Park?
Yes, so at the moment we're 25 staff, plus Andy and I, so I think about 27 in total. We sat down in May and did a 3-year orbit, so we feel like there's still further growth in primary care. So at the moment we've got 11 consultants on primary care, on GP and allied health, and I think in 3 years the aim for that division is 15 to 16. Though who knows? It's always really hard to say until it happens, isn't it? But because I think 4 years ago I probably would have said that division shouldn't be more than probably 6 people, and now it's 11. But the more you get into a market and dominate it, the more you can grow. Health tech's obviously much harder to plan in terms of growth, but it is a huge market. It could potentially be a huge market. So I think on the orbit, we went from 20, obviously we're 27 now, I think it was 31 heads next year, 37 the year after, and 43 in 3 years' time. But I don't know if that was ambitious planning, but that's the orbit, and it's written down. So that is the target. And I suppose to achieve this, we need to firstly, I think, keep our high performers, and that's recruiters and it's admin and marketing. So it's keeping all the really key people in the business, because without those, all you have really, well, you have a database, don't you? and that's all you have left. So it's keeping the high performers, and then also we're moving to a new marketing platform, and then later this year we're moving to a new CRM. So hopefully this will provide new leads and actually be game changing with some of the things we hope our new marketing platform and CRM can do, will allow us to grow the business further.
Okay, and you guys, for anyone who's actually watching the video stream of this podcast, you guys are dialing into this from your extraordinary new offices in Leeds, which you've bought, and they've had a very sexy, stylish refit. So it's a fantastic place to work. Anyone who's interested in talking in confidence to you about opportunities at Menlo Park, how should they get in touch with you?
So I'll probably drop me an email. So yeah, anyone who wants to work for an award-winning, market-leading company with a huge level of consultant support, massive database, amazing reputation, an unrivaled commission scheme, then yeah, drop me an email. Is that a good enough sell? And it's James at menloparkrecruitment.com.
Thank you very much. Andy, James, thank you very much for joining me today. Listeners, this has been the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. Hope you enjoyed that and were able to take some actionable points from it. Really interesting insight into healthcare and health tech recruitment. So this is Alison Humphries. If you're interested in talking about how you too can grow and be an award-winning company, contact me, Alison at recruitmentleadership.co.uk. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, review and share so that others can find the podcast too. We really appreciate your support. If you have any questions about the topics covered or wish to find out more about recruitment leadership, please email alison@recruitmentleadership.co.uk referencing the podcast. We're also on LinkedIn where you can follow Recruitment Leadership and connect with Alison Humphries. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us next time for another episode of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.